Turn the volume up a bit.
Can you hold it or not? See?
As some of you know, this is not my first bris. It's not the first time I made that joke either. But no matter how many times I go through this, or a person goes through this, there are some things that you never get used to. The first thing is I get nervous every time, so I thank Rabbi Hiller is not here for calming me down for the bris. But one of those things is the miracle of life. The emotion that the person feels during that split second when the baby emerges and you're waiting for the baby to cry is like the skies are opening up and all the details that have to go right in order for the baby to be healthy, what it has to go through to come from the womb, to come out, is just mind-blowing and it's humbling and it's something that we should never take for granted, the blessing and the gift of a healthy child. So the first thing is just to have the recognition to thank God for another healthy baby. And the other thing that you never get used to is the kindness of people. I was just telling somebody that there are two times that you really see your friends and the goodness of people, the times of simcha and the times of sorrow. And our family, the past couple of weeks, has had the greatest sorrow and the greatest simcha. And the friends and people in the community who spontaneously taken the initiative to make things much easier for us. I'm not going to start mentioning people by name because the list, thank God, is so long. But I just want to thank everybody for what you've done during both of these occasions. Just to say something short about a bris, the bris is one of the most unique mitzvahs. Long-lasting mitzvahs, observed mitzvahs, and unique mitzvahs. It's a kind of paradox which can be seen in the word itself. A bris is mentioned many times in the Torah. A bris means a covenant, but not necessarily in regard to circumcision. A bris is a covenant. And a covenant itself is a whole concept. What is a covenant? But in short, the covenant is the deepest bond that exists in a relationship because it defies logic and it can never be broken. Mila, on the other hand, means to separate or cut away. And in this case, it's a reference to the most physical, fleshly idea, coarseness. So what you have is two opposite extremes. The deepest spiritual connection and the most coarse, base, physical order. And what does that mean, this paradox, this opposite? So one of the explanations is it's the only time, normally when you have a concept of a mitzvah or a relationship, it exists deep down here. Or it depends how I feel in my mind. It's an experience. But you don't have a physical representation, something that's enduring and everlasting. You don't have a visible, tangible sign. And a bris milah, as the word suggests, is a physical, visible representation of somebody's most essential Jewishness, which which is why you start a child off in his life with this particular commandment. The name that we chose, Yeshua Eliyahu, Yeshua we read about in this week's Parsha, who is the loyal student of Moshe Rabbeinu, was the name of my grandfather, Alav Shalom. And out of all the people, he's one of the people that I had the closest relationship to. Not necessarily in the sense of influence or advice, but in the pure joy of spending time with him and being around him. I can remember as a child the anticipation. He lived in South Africa, and we were here, but we saw him often enough that I had that opportunity. And the excitement to get off the plane and to be around him. When I was 14 years old, he took me to Israel, just the two of us, took me around Israel, my first real trip to the land of Israel. And when we...
Ladies and gentlemen, sorry for the interruption. There's an empty lot across the street. Anyone who's parked on it, please move your car and you will be ticketed.
So you went to Israel when you were 14?
So he took me to Israel, and we spent some time. He took me around when I was 14, and then towards the end of his life, he was not well, and my uncle and I had the opportunity one last time to take him in a wheelchair and spend that time with him, and I showed him some different places because I've been living there the past year. Now, there's a lot to say, but if I had to capture the one thing that I noticed from my grandfather, it was the idea that he had made a positive impression on every single person that he met. It may not be the most appropriate story, but I'm going to tell you it's a good example. And there are a good handful of people in this room who knew him, so they can relate to this. But when he had a heart attack, he was rushing to the hospital, and I was with my two hands. And in the room there, you share the room, so they had just divided by the curtain or whatever. There were the two people that he shared the room with were not, at first glance, the nicest characters. They originally from Pakistan, and they were visiting from London. They got into a brawl in a bar and took out a few bouncers and put a knife and these type of conversations. And as we're sitting there with my grandfather, the guy is screaming on his cell phone. If you don't get us cursing and screaming, if you don't get us our money by this time, and everybody in the whole room is petrified. And all of a sudden my grandfather pipes up and says, excuse me, there are ladies in this room. So we were a little bit worried, Mr. Shapiro, to leave him in that room with those two people. When I came back 2 days later, we were wheeling him out. Everyone in the room, including these two guys, were saying, hey, goodbye, Mr. Shapiro. Remember, if you're ever in London, please give me a call on my cell phone number. And that was the type of guy that he was. There are dozens of stories like that. He was a loyal husband and friend and father. And I think it's significant that the people that I met that were his friends when he was older, in his 70s, were people that he had grown up with or been in the army with. And he was in the troops that liberated Italy. And when he made a good friend, he made it for life. That person was his friend for life. He showed everyone respect. And one thing that, there's not a day that goes by that my family doesn't make some remark, oh, what would he say about this? What do we, think about this? Or at least we think about him. So I'm sure that he would be very proud to see his family growing and continuing. Eliyahu is my wife's grandfather. He's the father of my mother-in-law, Leah Shalom Kanabas Eliyahu. And I never met him, but he was always described as someone that had the joie de vivre. Did I say that right? Joie de vivre, a joy for life. I lived in Paris for a year, but I never spoke French at all because my wife always laughed when I tried, but she's not here to correct me. He was born in Algeria, grew up in Algeria, and he was a very successful entrepreneur. He was one of 15 children and single-handedly supported his family. Many of them brought them into the business while they would sit and read the newspaper. And he waited until his sisters were married and everyone was taken care of before he got married. And he was known as a Baal Chesed, somebody that's very generous. He used to, every Friday afternoon, set aside money for tzedakah, and the local people in Algeria used to line up, and he used to distribute tzedakah money. And this is the quality of chesed, of generosity, that perhaps, the reason why I'm mentioning this, is because had he not had this quality of being generous and giving tzedakah, we may not be in this room today. Because when Algeria was changing hands and gaining independence, it was a French colony, and the Jewish people, it was a dangerous situation for them, and especially if you're wealthy, with the rebels. And one of his Muslim workers, who he was good to, came to him and told him that I've seen the list, the hit list, and you are next, tomorrow. And in the middle of the night, literally in the middle of the night, he packed up his stuff with his children, with his wife and children, moved to Paris, to Lyon, France, and started his whole life, left everything behind, his whole estate, all his money, everything, and started from scratch. And this quality of chesed, I'm sure that he passed on to his daughter and to her daughter, and it's our hope that it will continue in this next generation.